I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're delighted to welcome a very talented author. His name is Dr. Vernon Carrigan, and he has written a remarkable book. It is called A Life Story of Heritage and Faith. In this compelling work, the author shares his life experiences growing up in a rural setting and his 40-year career as an internal medicine physician, all the while exploring his deep relationships with God, family, friends, patients, and his enduring heritage and faith. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Authors Reputation Press for helping us put him in the spotlight today. We ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Doctor, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, it's my pleasure, Logan. I'm glad to be with you this morning.
Living and working in a rural setting is a little more personal than most settings. You mentioned before we got started today that there was a tornado that ripped through your area just days ago, and there were a number of fatalities. These are the type of situations you have to deal with as a doctor, and sometimes personally as a doctor when living in a rural area, don't you think?
Yes, I think perhaps rural areas are a little more closely knit than urban areas. There's a sense of wider community, and when tragedy strikes, it really affects everybody deeply in the community, and I think brings out the best in us as we work together to address those tragedies and the joys of life too, by the way.
Exactly, exactly. I live part of the year in a very small town. We don't even have a traffic light. And you know the people at the gas station, you know the people at the diner, you know the people at the market. And it is great because they're
Exactly.
your neighbors and your friends. You look at people in the other car differently than if you're in this big crowded area where everyone's a stranger. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book.
Well, I'm a physician, and during my many years of practice, I watched many patients and their families contract chronic illnesses, including cancer and Alzheimer's disease and other types of diseases, and die miserable deaths. And I kept asking God the question, why do you allow people to suffer like this? Maybe especially Christians or anybody really. And I'm also a student of history, so I've studied the plagues that wiped out Europe, the world wars, the millions of people who died during World War II, innocent Jewish people during the Holocaust. And I have suffered several life tragedies myself, including the loss of my first wife in a tragic automobile accident, the loss of our older son with a heart infection, the loss of our first grandson with SIDS, and my near death myself in an automobile accident, and the near death of my younger son in a freak accident. So, one of the reasons I wrote the book was to chronicle my sense of heritage that I developed on the farm and the sense of faith that was instilled in me on the farm and thereafter that helped me to meet all of these challenges spiritually and emotionally myself. And I wanted to chronicle all of that for my family and children and grandchildren. And I have this abiding hope that if other people read the book, they will be inspired to meet their life tragedies themselves, perhaps better equipped in some way.
How do you answer that age-old question of why do bad things happen to good people?
Well, I have developed an answer for myself that's in the book, and it really is a fairly deep theological question. But I believe that God, in this finite life that is bounded by time and the three dimensions of space, allows other people to exercise their free wills and allows natural law to be at work. God has an ultimate purpose, but ironically, he allows suffering and evil in this life so that people will have the ability to choose to join his family, to become a Christian, if you will. And that allows God's ultimate purpose to be fulfilled, to grow his family, his church. When the Lord comes back to take the church off of this earth, God's ultimate purpose will come into being outside of time and space, and that will be living with Him in glory. And my understanding of glory is expounded upon in the book. And as Paul says in Romans chapter 8, I reckon that the suffering of this present time is not worthy to be compared to the glory which ultimately that shall be revealed in us. So it is a deeply personal answer, and it is a deeply theological answer that some people may not accept as their own answer for why God allows suffering, but at least it has helped me answer that question for myself.
No, I agree with your answer. We're either puppets on a string or we have free will. It's basically one or two. You can't have it both ways. You can't have a divine master pulling the strings on everything and then have us autonomous individuals, right?
Exactly. And I delve into that question some in the book. It's an answer really without a question. You can defend either way, but for me, I think that God has definitely given me a free will, and I think He's given you and everybody else a free will, and they're free to exercise it. Thus, if someone wants to commit an evil act on me, it's probably going to happen if I can't defend myself. Like my wife, if she pulls out in front of a car in an intersection, nothing good can happen of that.
Mm.
If my son develops a heart infection, sometimes he's not going to survive that.
Yeah.
And God does intervene and supersede man's will or free will at sometimes. And I think He supersedes natural law at times. Those are called miracles.
Yeah.
But if they were the way that usually affairs work out, if God intervened all the time, they wouldn't be miracles.
Mm.
They would be the usual way of things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I can see that for sure. You have a great gift of faith. Was that instilled in you by your parents? Was that your upbringing? Tell us a little bit about your spiritual journey.
Yeah, I think all the way back, as far as I know, my ancestors were Christian, uh, and in on the small farm on which I lived, everyone there was Christian. We all went to church. We had Christian neighbors, and a sense of faith was instilled. My first wife once wrote, though, that faith that has not been yet tested is perhaps not real faith.
Mm.
So I think real faith can only be developed in the fires of life,
Mm.
in the cauldron of life. So when these challenges came along, the seminal parts of my faith, the foundational parts of my faith, were put through the fiery furnace, and the Lord used those to make me a deeper Christian with even deeper faith, who depended upon Him more deeply than I had before. And had it not been for my Christian faith, I probably would not have survived spiritually, or maybe even emotionally or physically, uh, from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You went through a lot, obviously much more than your fair share of tragedies have befallen you. Um, I think as you spoke, what came to me was the story of Christ himself, is that he lived and died, and in between was betrayed and suffered intolerably. His is a testament of faith. His is a testament of redemption and going through those fires to have that faith tested, as you said, right?
Yes, and in the upper room discourse, in John chapter 14 through John chapter 17, which is, I think, one of the pinnacles of the New Testament, Christ does not promise prosperity. He promises hardships and persecution, but He also promises glory in
Mm.
the end, the same glory that the Father has given Him. And in John chapter 17, He prays that God give us that glory, and that God make us one with each other in the church, and one with God the Father, as Christ and God the Father are one, which I believe is the essence of that ultimate glory of which I was speaking in heaven, our actually becoming one with God. Heaven to me is, I don't think, going to be sitting on a white puffy cloud playing a harp, or
Mhm.
living in a golden house with golden streets. It is going to be existence in unity with God and living a life that is not bounded by time and space, but a life of an infinite number of dimensions where God's church rules and reigns and supervises his creation as he meant it in the beginning, without evil and suffering
Yeah,
or sin.
that's very, very beautiful thoughts, very, very beautiful philosophy, very, very beautiful faith that you espouse there. Indeed. Before we leave you today, I just wanted to ask you, what would you like the folks at home to take away from your book?
I think uh, I think I would like them to focus on how my faith has sustained me, and read the Bible and complement those two things and other things from their own lives. And then when those fiery trials come, when those persecutions come, when the sicknesses come, when the deaths come, when the accidents come, they will be, I think, more prepared to deal with them spiritually and emotionally than they otherwise might have been. So it is my hope that my book really encourages and empowers people and enables people to live a more faithful life themselves.
Wonderful, wonderful. As you speak, I'm also recalling the poem, The Desiderata. I don't know if you've ever read it or familiar with it, but it begins with, "You're a child of the universe, no less than the trees and the stars. You have a right to be here." There's one segment and it says, "Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune." And I
Right.
think that's part of your message as well, that you have a good relationship with God, a strong relationship with God. Look at the big picture of eternity, not just on the timeliness of our earthly existence. And it'll help you through insufferable times. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you, Logan. It was my pleasure.
True pleasure. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all your thoughts. Vernon Carrigan has written a remarkable book. It is called A Life Story of Heritage and Faith. In this work, he shares his life experiences growing up in a rural area and his 40-year career as an internal physician, as well as exploring his deep relationships with God, family, friends, patients, and his enduring heritage and faith. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.